What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the JC Penni Podcast. Uh, I'm thrilled to have Jason Smith on the pod this week. Jason, you're on for a big occasion. This is the 25th episode of the JC Penni Podcast.
That's impressive. Good job.
Mama,
Surprised.
I made it. I'm surprised. The fact that we got this far, I never thought this would get to 5 episodes, let alone 25. Um, but here we are. So, really quick before we get into the big celebration today, just one reminder. The weekly reminders of, like, if you're here, let us know in the chat. If you're not in our league, if you have any questions about, should I trade for this player? Should I add this player? Who should I start? That's what we're here for. We'll drop what we're doing to answer your questions. We care about you guys. We want to make sure that you guys are, that you have your questions answered. But other than that, the big thing we're going to tackle today is our grades. And Jason as always, Jason's the one to call me out more than anyone else. Calls me out for not having done the first trimester grades, and it's true.
You promised, and then radio silence.
I always overpromise and under-deliver. That's the way you're supposed to do it, right?
I think that's what lawyers do all the time, and politicians.
Exactly. Speaking of which, congratulations on your new governor there, bud. I
mean, it was two rich old white dudes from Great Falls, which is one of the richest places in the country. So
it's always two old rich white dudes. Unfortunately,
whatever.
It shouldn't be, but it always is. So all politics aside, I tried to message Jerry. I haven't heard back from him, so I just said, screw it. Let's get some grades out. So this will be our, like, right over the first half. We're 1 week past the mid-season point for the regular season now with the extended schedule. So we'll go over our grades for all 10 teams, and if we have time, we'll do some predictions. So without further ado, let's get into our grades. We'll go in the order of the standings. And so we have to start then with the only man who is 6-2 now, first place in the league, Alex Birdshock. Has been just clapping cheeks lately. Him's real good. He currently leads the league in scoring, and it's by a fairly wide margin. Almost 100 points separates. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not true. McMillan leads the league in scoring. Alex is about 100 points behind him. For now, he has benefited from a fairly soft schedule. I'm pretty sure Alex is has the lowest total of points against in the league. That's what I'm saying. Like, he obviously deserves to be where he's at, but I'll let you go ahead and lead the way on this one. What should his grade be? Shout out to Window, by the way, who joined the chat.
Then Robbie Anderson. Melvin Gordon's in that timeshare, and he's not the future in Denver, so I don't think things are looking up for him. Antonio Brown's been great when he's healthy. Devonta Smith is just okay. I think Chase Edmonds will have a really good end of the year, but nothing too amazing. He's also in a timeshare with James Conner.
Right.
So that's iffy there. But I mean, I'm really nitpicking here. Like it's
Yeah.
definitely an A. I don't think it's quite an A plus. Just a really well balanced roster. He's already 6-2. He's second in points scored. He's a lock in for the playoffs, in my opinion, barring any ridiculous injuries. I mean, he could lose. Like he could lose Najee, and I think he would still be fine. He could lose Deebo Samuel, and I think he would still be fine.
That's the thing. He has one of the best starting lineups coupled with one of the deeper benches in the league, right? Like, let's say Najee goes down, right? He's definitely not an A at that point, or an A plus at that point. To be clear, I've marked him down on my list as an A plus, and it might be a little bit of a hot take because, you know, it's
a hot take.
Here's the thing, right? Like you've identified the issues. Like Russ is out, but he's coming back. He is like any team is one injury away from being in trouble, but of the teams he has depth where you want it at running back. He has Melvin Gordon. Because of the trade with you, he has Chase Edmonds. Not to mention his wide receivers are freaking terrifying. Like adding Cooper Kupp, he already had Justin Jefferson, who's a top tier flex option. He had Deebo, who has been a wide receiver 1. He added another wide receiver 1. He has a running back 1 in Najee. His only real weakness is not the lack of a true RB2, but in theory, like between Josh Jacobs, Melvin Gordon, Chase Edmonds, he has 3 of them. So his team is very, very balanced and versatile. He's weak at tight end, but then again, everyone's weak at tight end, so it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Tight end is such an inconsistent position.
I don't even know why we have that position.
I like it. I mean, it helps for teams that have a good tight end. I mean, I fell into Mike Gesicki this year, and he's been I think maybe a top 5 option at tight end, which is just insane with how bad the Dolphins have been. But you are right that obviously a lot hinges on Stafford and Russ staying healthy, right? Everyone. I mean, everyone's one injury away. But like you said, second in overall points scored, top record in the league. His team is just scary on paper. It is balanced, it is deep, and I don't want to play against Cooper Kupp and Deebo Samuel and Justin Jefferson and Najee Harris on any given week. Not to mention he's putting up points on people. He's getting wins on people. I think he's on he's not on a win streak of any kind. He lost 2 weeks ago. He won last week, but he is putting up points on people without Russ. Russ has been out for a solid 2-3 weeks now, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that he's starting Sam Darnold and Matt Stafford.
He's been out since half of week 5.
I mean, yeah. So week 6, week 7, week 8, 3 weeks now, he has been still putting up points at a good clip. If I were Alex, I'd be very happy. And I also think it takes stones to make that trade with you. I think on both ends it takes stones to trade away
yeah, I mean,
elite talent.
I think value-wise, he probably edged out a little bit.
Yeah.
But when I talk about my team later, losing Chase Edmonds really didn't matter to me.
You had running back depth is the benefit you had. And he the 2 things he accomplished in the trade was get a wide receiver 1, and he got the wide receiver 1. And then
after we agreed to the trade, put up 33, and I'm just
yeah.
What is happening?
Last week he put up 21. Cooper Kupp, I can't complain too much because Robert Woods has finally started to turn it on a little bit. But Cooper Kupp has been beyond insane.
Yep. All right. Yeah. I think for the people that didn't hear, we both think Alex's team is amazing.
Yep.
A couple nitpicky things I found, particularly he could maybe have some better depth. Mostly Robbie Anderson sucks. I don't know why. But I don't think we need to say anything more about Alex's team. It's good.
Enough of Alex. We'll move on to Jason McMillan, who is the second in the standings by virtue. He wins the tiebreaker by virtue of the fact that he has the overall lead for points scored. This is what I thought Alex had by about 100 points. And I'll let you go ahead and take it from here, my friend.
All right. I'll just go out and say it. I'm giving his team a C-.
Wow! Okay, I want to hear this.
Derrick Henry's done for the season. He was carrying his team. Let's look at his bench. Chase Claypool, Tyler Boyd, Kenyon Drake. Like he has no bench. Like at all. I don't like his quarterback situation. Derek Carr, super spotty. Matt Ryan, super spotty. Tom Brady's great. Don't get me wrong. I think Darrell Henderson is great. His wide receivers are very serviceable. Kelsey, obviously, the most valuable tight end in the league. 36-year-old Adrian Peterson, I don't think. If I was a gambling man, like maybe he'll get you flex numbers, but he's not going to break off those 80-yard runs. He doesn't have the top speed Derrick Henry does. So I think he has no depth. He's made no actions at his team. He is getting David Montgomery back, but I mean, Khalil Herbert, that's going to be a timeshare hard. Like they're not going to just let Khalil Herbert like not touch it. He's the future running back in Chicago. So I think he's one injury away from not making the playoffs.
It is interesting that, I mean, he's had the benefit of not having...
If he had traded Kelsey or Gronk after week 1 or 2, like, his grade would probably be a full letter higher, but he doesn't want to make moves, and it's going to start biting him in the ass, I think. His team is on a hard decline for a couple weeks now. Without Derrick Henry, that's just going to continue. He's on the bubble for me to make the playoffs. I don't think he'll finish 1 or 2.
Wow.
I have him at around the 5 or 6 prediction.
So I will say that Jason was an A in my eyes until the Derrick Henry injury, but I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, that changed everything.
But I did not knock him nearly as much as you did. I gave him a B+. And the reason why is, I guess this is kind of like the optimist argument here, right? Like, you are absolutely right. Derrick Henry is a monumental blow to his fantasy team, as it is to anyone who has Derrick Henry. I was cursing myself for not drafting Derrick Henry at 5 instead of Josh Allen, like within 1 or 2 weeks of the season, because Derrick Henry was going off, Josh Allen was doing nothing. Now I couldn't be happier. But it's... when you look at his team, there are definitely issues at quarterback. I mean, like the fact that but not glaring ones, right? Like Tom Brady is the best quarterback in football, in fantasy. Derek Carr has been a super flex option over the season, and Matt Ryan, you don't really need like a third quarterback necessarily, especially if Tom Brady is past his bye this week. He might take a loss this week, trying to like gather things together. But the exact thing you said about Gronk and Kelsey is exactly why he's okay. He has value at a position. He has 2 elite level players.
Until he is willing to do anything with his roster, my grade will not move. He has value, and if I thought that he'd be willing to make trades and do the things he needed to do to win, then it would be higher. I just don't have any faith that he's willing to play fantasy football.
I do. I don't get me wrong. I get it. He has made an astonishingly low number of moves this year. I think
James Conner got 2 touchdowns on 5 carries last week. Like that's not like
what's crazy about this is, right? Like when you look at the transactions that have happened in the league so far, he has only added in 8 weeks of a season. Do you know how many players he's added?
3, I think.
3. And what's crazy about that is he is still going to his bench and rotating people around. He's like swapped his lineup around. He's been
coasting on a great draft.
He has, but I'm saying Brad has actually made the least number of roster moves week in and week out. Brad's only activated 15 different players to McMillan's 21. They're 1-2 in that department, as is Brad and McMillan in terms of adding players. They're both only guys in single digits for additions. But, like, the reason... Anyway, back to... This is all a tangent. Back to McMillan. He has the position... Like I said, he has a QB1, a QB2. He has 2 running back 2s in Henderson and Connor. He is going to get Montgomery back at some point this year in all likelihood.
I don't think Connor's a running back 2.
He's now...
He's touchdown dependent, and he is going to regress.
He is...
Like I said, 2 touchdowns on 5 carries.
I understand, but he also is...
When Arizona got no passing touchdowns, like, that's not sustainable.
I understand, but overall, right, it's not as if he's having one boomer bust week. It's not as if the weeks where he, like, didn't score touchdowns, that, like, I understand what you're saying, like, he is touchdown dependent, but in the same way that 2 touchdowns is an aberration, 5 carries for James Conner is an aberration. He's averaging somewhere around 10 carries, and on occasional games he'll get like 16 to 18. He's getting a decent clip of yardage. He is their vulture, right? He is their touchdown guy. He has, I think, 8 touchdowns on the year. Like, at a certain point, that's who they're going to at the goal line. Like, it's not an accident. For if you have 5 carries for 22 yards, and they're both touchdowns, 2 of them are touchdowns, you know they're going to him in the red zone. That's the only explanation. He's not running for 80 yards and getting one. So
yeah, I mean, he's their red zone back.
Right, but the Cardinals are going to be in the red zone a lot. So, like, I understand what your argument. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying the other side to look at is he's their vulture back. He's their... Who was the first vulture there was? It was in Carolina. It was... They had... I think it was like D'Angelo Williams and like someone else behind him was like the vulture. Shout out to anyone who can figure this out. I can't remember his name.
It'll come to me later.
But at wide receiver, he has 2 wide receiver 2s in Thielen and Cooper. Hunter Renfro's value goes up in light of the tragic news with regard to Henry Ruggs and what happened there. I mean, that's just a nightmare. But,
yeah,
you know, it's going to increase Hunter Renfro's value. It's going to open up maybe more looks.
So I think the difference in our grades here is if I was just grading his remaining roster, it would be higher. But roster plus manager, that's why it goes down.
I don't think there's any way that the trade deadline on December 3rd in our league comes and goes with Travis Kelce and Gronk both on his bench. I mean,
Gronk's... No one's going to trade for Gronk now. Like,
you don't think a team would take a flyer on him for like even a flex level running back? I think someone in this league will be that hurt, like that deep at tight end that wants to try, like, that looks at Gronk's upside. Because when you look at Gronk, yes, he has had these injury issues over and over, but he has the bye to get healthy now. Aside, like, look at his numbers the first 3 weeks of the season: 25 points on 8 catches, 90 yards, with 2 TDs, 4 catches, 2 of which were TDs for 39 yards, and then again targeted 8 times, had 4 catches for 55 yards. Like, his numbers were really good until his injury.
See, like I said, if like, I don't even look at his roster when I go to try and talk trades with people.
And this is assuming he wants to trade Gronk. He could trade Kelce, and all of a sudden you're talking about monumental value. And honestly, that's probably the smarter move. So all that to say, like, I really do think he has the makings of a playoff. I don't think there's any way that, barring McMillan keeping both tight ends on his lineup, that he misses the playoffs. And even then, he might not. Just because he has a 100-point lead right now. I know that can evaporate in 2 weeks, but do we really think his scoring is going to go down that astronomically? I don't think he's in the bottom of the barrel here. I think he's a playoff team.
I think that 100-point league is all the difference between Henry and value over replacement every week. Like, but he would not be the points leader if he didn't have Derrick Henry, and he doesn't have Derrick Henry anymore.
I get the argument. So let's move on now to third in the standings, which I believe is Window, actually, who was the only other 5-2 teams. And also the man who, by the way, he's predicting from the chat he gets an A+ for what he has to do. He shouldn't be where he's at. Long term, pray for him. He's been putting work and moves in. But he believes
Spoiler
he deserves
alert, he's not
an
an
A. Oh, well, I will let you go ahead, like always, and take the lead here.
All right. So I mean, 5-3 record, solid. Kyle Pitts and Michael Pittman, the Pitt brothers, I think are both coming into their own.
Did they both go to Pitt? Graduate from
I
Pitt?
don't think so.
No, of course they did. I'm just making a joke.
Yeah. But let's look at his running backs. Khalil Herbert, backup. Javonte Williams, backup. Antonio Gibson, even though he was starting, he was, I think, the third highest snaps last week. He's plagued by injuries. Huge question mark. Chuba Hubbard, backup. Devontae Booker, backup. That's zero depth. He has one starting running back. That's an every week starter in James Robinson, in my opinion. Let's look at his quarterback situation. He's got Patty Mahomes. Yeah, not playing super great this year, but fantasy numbers, can't complain. Tua, are you happy if you're starting Tua? And that's it, right? Yeah.
Yep.
He's got 1.5 quarterbacks. B- for me.
So, a B-.
His wide receivers are solid. Like, that's the only thing he's really got going for him.
I mean, to be honest, the fact that you gave him a B- and McMillan what'd you give him, like a C+?
I gave McMillan a C-. It's probably harsh, but it's
that was incredibly harsh. And here's the reason why. I understand what you're saying about Derrick Henry, but do you really think Derrick Henry's the only difference between over or almost a 200-point swing, like with the two of them? Because Window is 6th in total points scored at 956, right? He has benefited from a soft schedule. I think maybe the second softest in the league. And that's why he's 5-3. And the main weakness you've identified is, like, I'll give him credit for winning 5 games. He shouldn't have won 5 games. He won 5 games based on he blew his entire free agency budget on these backup running backs that fell into starting roles. But like you identified, how many of these guys, the Khalil Herberts and the Javonte Williams and the Antonio Gibsons and the Chuba Hubbards and the Devontae Bookers of the world, are going to be starting at season's end? Do we really think that Chuba Hubbard's going to have a role in Carolina once Christian McCaffrey finally gets healthy, assuming arguendo he does?
No. Chuba Hubbard is not good at football.
So the big hole, I do think Tua is actually not a bad ad.
Okay, well,
I understand Dolphins bias aside. Like I do think the Dolphins schedule in the second half of the season, they're going to play the Jets again. They're going to play the Patriots. Actually, I think they play the Jets twice.
They have the Jets twice.
They play the Patriots once. They play Houston this week. There are some really good matchups on Miami's remaining schedule. I think once they get a win, they'll start to build confidence. Because they're 1-7 and they're on a 7-game losing streak and they're terrible.
Looking back, I think I was maybe a little harsh on McMillan, and that might have been a little personal bias.
Yeah,
I would probably say that.
But
I think it might be closer if I switched to McMillan and Window.
I'm giving Window a C-, and I think maybe I think maybe the minus is the only thing I'm questioning, whether I give him the minus or just a straight C. Like I'm gonna revise it. I'm gonna give him a C. I'm not gonna give him the minus. I'm gonna give him just a straight C. And the reason why is because his roster is in my view like average. It is like it's if you look at his roster as a whole, the glaring issue is the RB2 spot, right? He has wide receivers. He has Stephon Diggs. He has DJ Moore. He has Michael Pittman. Like, Michael Pittman's been a huge surprise, but those guys are like if that's your wide receiver core, it's a good enough wide receiver core to get you through most weeks. Michael Gallup's on his IR, has been on the IR and finally comes back, I think, this week. Like, he has options if he wants to make a trade. Not to mention, like you said, Kyle Pitts had a bad week last week, but has been like there are games where like I think the Dolphins game, Kyle Pitts went off, and he like two of his last three matchups, he's put up almost 20 points or over 20 points.
Well, Kyle Pitts is basically their wide receiver one. He doesn't even line up in like as a tight end. He lines up as a wide out half the time.
Right. Right. So like all things considered, I think Window has, and obviously Patrick Mahomes has hugely underperformed for where he was drafted. He's QB6.
Have you watched him play though? I think his fantasy numbers are better than his play. I don't know if he's underperforming fantasy wise. I think he's
okay, but
he's like Jalen Hurts level, like bad football, but still getting the fantasy points.
No, like hold on. Patrick Mahomes has had this season he has made some questionable decisions, absolutely. But like, let's not forget this man went to the Super Bowl last year. Let's not forget this man, like some of the plays that we've seen him make in his time in the league, his short time in the league, might I add, have been insanity. Like some of the throws he can make while on the move. I don't necessarily think that the way Patrick Mahomes has played the first 8 weeks of the season is going to be how Patrick Mahomes plays the rest of the season. I think there is the same way like there's some regression due sometimes. I think there's some good play from Patrick Mahomes that can be
statistic-wise. Patrick Mahomes, like I forget the exact name of the statistic, but it was like throws that should have been picked off. They just were never picked off any year before this for Patrick Mahomes. Like, and then this year they're getting picked off. Like,
sure,
his luck is right where it's going to be.
I think there have been a couple of drops too.
There have been, I think, 3 of the interceptions have been ones that the receivers like popped up in the air.
Yeah,
I mean, he's still averaging over an interception a game. He has 1 game without a pick.
Let me get back to Window for a second, and like I said, there's one more thing that I wanted to just talk on. Window has had a lot of injuries. Next to Daryl, he's had the most players on the IR, I think, with 5. I think Daryl's had 6, if I remember correctly, like 6 different times he's put players in the IR. But like, what the thing about Window that I just wanted to touch on is like how close he is to being like in the bottom half of the league, right? Like, I'm pretty sure he's had my matchup with him, he won by essentially 5 points in week 3.
Won by less than a point against me.
He won by less than a point against you.
Or I think it might have been 1, a little over 1.
Whatever, but he squeaked out a win against you. He only beat Zach by 6 points. That was in week 6. He only beat Alex by, well, no, he beat Alex handily. It was in week 8 where he beat you by 1 point. So like, he won 3 games by a collective less than 10 points. If you flip those, what's his record? 2-6.
Yeah, I wasn't following the numbers.
He'd be last in the league.
But yeah.
So like, anything can happen. I think Window, if you look at his roster top to bottom, it's just average. There's nothing that blows me away, you know.
Like, looking back, like I looked at it decently, but I think I was a little biased before. I think I would change McMillan to a B- and Window to a C as well.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I pointed out the weaknesses. I just don't think I graded it
absolutely
correctly.
Well, let's give you another chance to redeem yourself. This one will be the top of the 4 and 4 teams, and it's time to let your inner bias show, because that's you.
I'll let you go first on me.
Oh, hold on. Let me really quick change the text. So, your roster. Let me pull up your roster for the folks following along at home. So, what's interesting about your lineup is you're 3rd in total points scored. And when you look at your lineup top to bottom, right? I actually give, like, I always look to position ranks, right? I want to see how a specific player is doing at their position. That's how you kind of like, that's the quick way to analyze, right? Yes, you had a tough loss to Window, and you shouldn't. Window shouldn't win a game with 85 points. You shouldn't even be in consideration to win a game.
No, like
at
I said,
84.
I said I hope we tie because neither of us deserves to win this. It was hot garbage.
Absolutely, but when you look at your lineup, right? Kyler Murray is an elite level quarterback and was a wise decision for you to draft. Yes, there are injury issues that have kind of been lingering. Yes, he's had a couple bad weeks in a row, but oh look, you have Justin Herbert as your super flex, who is technically speaking a QB1, and granted, and they still a QB1 despite a pretty rough week last week. Like, that's how crazy it is. Look at what both your quarterbacks put up less than 15 points last week, and they're still QB1s. Like, quarterback's been kind of inconsistent, but I do love your quarterbacks. I look at your running backs. Cordell Patterson has been a freaking surprise and a half. Like, that might be the steal of the season for you. The big question mark is going to be Zeke in my eyes, right? Like, obviously he's an elite player, but does he produce at the level? Because Cooper Kupp, man, he was something else. And I get why you made the move, because you have the wide receivers you need in Tyreek, in Terry McLaurin, in Brandon Cooks. Like, I get it, right? But the thing that helped you is Elijah Mitchell looked really good last week. Like, can you imagine a lineup of Kyler, Cordell, Elijah Mitchell, and then you have Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, and your pick of either Terry McLaurin or Brandon Cooks? Not to mention DeAndre Swift, who's on your bench. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, if you had known Cordell Patterson was going to be an RB1, which he is right now, would you have made the trade for Zeke when you have Cooper Kupp, the best wide receiver in fantasy? That's the question mark I have for you, is because your season's gonna be tied to that trade. In fair or unfair, it's gonna be tied to who won and lost that trade and how that trade affects your playoff chances. All that said, you have a freaking deep team. Like, it's really deep. And granted, you have some players on bye who are gonna fall in the position rankings, but like, when you look at their average scoring, like, everybody on your team is putting up numbers. You might have one of the deepest teams in the league. So, all that filleting of your team aside, I feel like I have to give you, like, again, just given the total points scored, I have to give you a good grade. So I'm going to give you the same grade I gave McMillan, which is a B+. I think, oh wait, I put yours in the wrong one though. I put it on your grade. I think much like McMillan, it's different with McMillan. I think McMillan has a more like top tier talent, whereas you have a larger quantity of great rather than a smaller quantity of fantastic. But I think for both reasons, I would be surprised if, given this roster, you didn't make the playoffs. You've been very fortunate to not have a lot of injury issues, I don't think. I don't remember any major injuries that you've had.
Nothing really crazy.
Right.
Like, I mean, I've always had, like, Mitchell missed a few weeks there, but I had somebody sub in, but that's been the only out, I think.
Right. I think
Tyreek, did Tyreek miss a game? I forget. I know he had some injuries earlier in the season.
What's funny about this is I'm going to be very hard on the other 4 and 4 teams. I think you are the only 4 and 4 team that deserves to be in playoff position right now. And we'll get to that in a minute, but you know, you are 1 point away from a 5-3 record. You are third in points scored, like I said. And you've also, the one thing is you have had a fairly weak schedule, but it also doesn't surprise when you're one of the 3 players who has over 1,000 points this year.
So I gave myself the same grade, B+. It's also the second highest grade I'm giving out today.
So you're channeling your inner Jerry is what you're telling me.
Sure. I mean,
I'm kidding.
I mean, just up and down, like my roster, like solid. Like
Yeah.
where is the weakness?
I
I don't think there really is one. I mean, you can say, you know, Brandon Cooks is kind of on a bad team, but they're always going to be throwing. And Brandon Cooks is an amazing wide receiver. Terry McLaurin, kind of boomer bust, busted on me last week. I mean, same thing with Tyreek. He's also boomer bust. A lot of players on my team have that boom or bust kind of feel, which is why my record is the way it is. I either do really well or do horribly. I can't seem to win games. Kyler is on the decline a little bit. Part of that's his ankle. He's not playing the same football he was. He's not moving in the pocket. He's not rushing as much right now. Trading Cooper Kupp and then watching him put up 55 points over 2 weeks was rough. Zeke didn't have a good week, but if you didn't watch the game, you would think it was bad. But literally the entire game was the Vikings putting in 8 people in the box and asking the Cowboys to throw on them. So that's what they did, and they won the game. So I'm not worried about Zeke. I think he is top 5 running back to have right now. You know, Eckler, Najee, Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin, and Zeke, I would probably say, are the top 5. So I like my team. It's got a lot of depth. I'm pretty injury resilient. Somebody could get hurt, and I would have somebody to plug in their place. Elijah Mitchell, I think, has now a stranglehold on the 49ers backfield, and they're going to use him. He's going to get points. So
I just wanted to touch on two things you said. One, with really quick with Kyler's injury, he's still putting up, like, he's put up 20 points. I think 3 of the last 5 weeks and 2 of the last 3.
It was mostly last week. If you watch the game, he was under pressure, and normally he's able to run, but he wasn't running.
Right.
So,
and it's always like always tough when it's like a recency bias. Like, he starts off, or primacy and recency. You remember how he started off the season putting up more than 33 in back-to-back weeks, and then all of a sudden fell off. The other thing too that I just want to touch on was the idea of the boomer bust part of your team, right? Like, we've had conversations, Jerry and I, on previous podcasts about that being the meta. Like, where if in theory, right, if you beat everybody on a given week, that's what you need for the playoffs to make sure you're going to win the league. It is tough when you crap out, when you roll snake eyes, when you don't have that performance, but it also effectively maximizes your chances of locking up a win against anybody, right? So I agree with everything you've said. I do think I really liked your point about the fact that if you had an injury, like, a catastrophic injury to, like, let's say you had an injury to Kyler Murray, right? Well, Justin Herbert and Kirk Cousins, it's a drop off, but it's not a huge one. It's not a mortal wound to your season. If you had an injury to if you have an injury to any of your best players, Tyreek Hill, like, you have guys who can step in. Your roster gets weaker, but it's not a death wound the same way it was for, it can be for other teams, just by virtue of the fact you have a pretty deep bench. So, moving right along, let's move on to James Waller, and this is the second of our 3 4-4 teams. James, the one thing I just wanted to say before we talk about his team, he was 0-4 to start the season and has won 4 straight games. Not saying he deserves to win 4 straight games, but he won 4 straight games, and now he finds himself at 500.
He's about to lose, but
go ahead. I'm gonna change the text while you give him a grade.
All right. So let me just go over to James's team real quick. So I gave James a C.
Okay.
He's 9th in points scored, so not looking great. 4-4 doesn't mean a whole lot. Everyone's kind of jumbled in here, so yeah, he's not at the bottom, but the bottom is just one game behind that. His team just doesn't score a lot of points. Dalvin healthy now, and if he goes down, Madison subs in fine. AJ Brown is on an upward trajectory. Deontay Johnson is just consistent at like 13 points a game. Mark Andrews, great. But, a thing you like to look at is position ranks. Compare his position ranks to mine. Mine are on average like 15 to 20 higher.
Right.
Up and down.
There is some variability there because the position ranks, unlike the average points per game, position ranks don't account for bye weeks, like teams that have or haven't had their byes. That's obviously going to throw some variation in there, but you have a great point.
I mean, I wasn't being scientific on it. It's just an eyeball. But
no. I was just
an eyeball is not going to move you 30 points.
You're fine.
And yeah, he's about to be 4-5. No Rodgers, who had a juicy matchup against Kansas City. Riding the pines this week. Might be in some shit because he told the league he was vaccinated, but really he was not. So I don't know what's gonna result from that. It might just be a fine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that the league will discipline him or not. It certainly isn't a great look. It certainly raises a specter of concern.
But it also changes when he can come back. He has to. It's not like if you're vaccinated, you just need 2 negative tests and then you're good. It's different. I mean, I don't it's a Thursday game, so no, it's a Sunday game, right?
Yeah, it's Sunday afternoon.
I imagine he'll be back, but it was just interesting. But I mean, that's his high scoring player right there. That he won't have.
The irony is that Aaron Rodgers last week was his lowest scoring quarterback, which is just insanity.
Well, that game was just.
I mean, who would have thought
not a good football game to watch?
Who would have thought that Jimmy Garoppolo? Well, yeah, who would have thought that Jimmy Garoppolo would have put up 27? Right,
not Jerry.
So I will tell you that.
I mean, are you happy starting Jordan Howard?
No, and I'm happy to pick up here. I will tell you that I am actually a lot harder than James a lot harder on you than James. A lot harder on James than you were. I'm going to be hard on both him and Jerry as the 4-4 teams because I think
he's probably deserves a D if I.
Oh no, that's what I'm giving him.
If I'm being honest,
that's what I'm giving him. And I gave him a D because his roster, he is a Trojan horse. Both he and Jerry are Trojan horses at 4-4. They've had the benefit of the fact that they've won games that I don't know that they necessarily should have. They're being outscored. They are only 4
sub
teams.
900 people, I think.
Right, I'm sorry. Yeah. Daryl's also sub 900, but Daryl's had massive injury issues, and I think that Daryl's had the biggest injury issues of the year. Jerry's had the most significant injury of the year, maybe, and McCaffrey won overall. What injuries has, James really had to deal with? He's had Chris Carson out. He's had Dalvin Cook out, but he had Madison. His issues are entirely that his roster isn't good. And the irony here is that I tried again today. I've tried now twice. The only person I've actually made had any kind of remotely serious trade talks with is James, who I'm saying his roster isn't good. So I'm kind of making his argument for him, I guess, that I'm interested in some of his players. But that's more about me being a bad fantasy football player than it is about him being a good one. Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown, I think, are good talents, but they're also boomer bust players. AJ Brown has been a huge disappointment until like recently, and he finally, I think
he's had lingering issues. AJ
right.
Brown is fine.
He's had a great last 2 weeks. Does this continue the rest of the season? How much confidence do you have in AJ Brown? Because there were, aside from the last, like, until about week 6, AJ Brown was putting up numbers consistent with Allen Robinson. Like, AJ Brown, I think, is a boomer bust player.
Allen Robinson hasn't broken 10 points in 5 weeks he played through 6 weeks. He got double digits twice. And
I said the first 5 weeks of the year, he played 4 games, and of those, he got. You're right. So he got 12 twice. The first 5 games he played of the year. He also got
the one of those games he got hurt.
0.3 and 5.3.
Take out his 0.3 and look at his average. Like
5, 5, 12, 12. Okay, so his average is what? Like rounding up, it's 36 divided by 4.
8.5.
Okay, is that really what you want out of your number one wide receiver? Because who's his one wide receiver otherwise?
Okay, and then look at his next 2 weeks.
No, I understand that. That's his potential. That's what you want out of AJ Brown. I totally understand that. But if he's hitting for you 2 out of 7 weeks he's played, and even if you want to take the injury off, 2 out of 6 weeks he's played, 1 out of every 3 games, does that get you in the playoffs? Does that get you a championship? Absolutely not. Not to mention he doesn't have the same issues. The same reason why I was extolling your team is the same reason why his team is a dumpster fire, like it's aptly named. Because he doesn't have depth. Aside from Alex Madison, who he luckily had, behind Dalvin Cook, he has nothing in the tank. The one person on his bench that, so he could get Chris Carson and Alex Collins back in the rotation as a serviceable running back, maybe, right? Like, you would hope that the Seattle, if Chris Carson comes back to the fold, maybe he comes in to perform. Maybe. But that's best
one of them is getting the majority of the carries.
But even then, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know that Seattle.
No, I agree. He has 4 good players and 1 I'm iffy on. I think Dalvin is solid. I think AJ Brown is solid. Mark Andrews solid. Aaron Rodgers solid. Hollywood Brown, I'm iffy on.
Right.
He's getting points. His lowest games aren't that low.
I don't see
I agree. I think his team is not good. I think he is on the outside looking in now, and I think he needs some help to change up his roster a little bit.
Yeah, which is why I offered him a trade.
Samesies.
So we'll move on and we'll talk about the last 4-4 team, which is my usual co-host on the show, Jerry. So take it away, Jason. What do you got for Jerry?
Let's find his team.
And while you're looking him up, I'll do the same for the lovely viewers at home.
So I also, I think it's either a C or a C minus.
Okay, which
one? Probably a C, thanks to you.
Thanks to me.
And you gifting him Daniel Jones.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's the number 14 quarterback
in the Superflex league. I made a huge mistake. And
we'll get to that later. We'll touch on that.
Yay.
So Austin Eckler having an amazing year. Don't expect that to change. Christian McCaffrey might finally be back. So that running back position is solid. I mean, Keenan Allen can do great. DeAndre Hopkins is having a good year. Hopefully his hamstring heals up. Julio's been hurt all year. Hard to say. I don't like AJ Green. Zach Moss is getting the majority of the touches. He just picked up Boston Scott. He has Miles Sanders. I think Philly finally realizes that, hey, maybe they should run the ball when their running backs get 6 yards a touch. So, I mean, he's got the best running back duo going forward by far. He just got Daniel Jones, so he's got a quarterback. I don't like his other quarterback options. Heineke's been very up or down. Jordan Love is just a one-game fill-in here against Kansas City.
I was actually really surprised he made that move. I don't know who he dropped to do it though. In fairness,
Trey Lance.
Okay, then I guess I'm not as surprised.
He made like 3. He like dropped Trey Lance, picked somebody up, dropped them, picked him up once he saw the news. So,
yeah, he's just streaming. I see.
But he's low on fab budget, which I haven't really talked about before. But when you notice someone drops someone they spent half their budget on, that they didn't get a lot of value out of, not great. Yeah, weaker quarterback, wide receiver. Julio just makes it really iffy, and then just no depth beyond that, really. Boston Scott could do okay. Zach Moss could do okay. Lowest in points scored, but I think that he's going to start scoring more points, so that's not super telling right now. He's a long way from the wild card, but like he's close to being top 5. So he's got to manufacture some wins, but still a lot of red flags. A few big critical mistakes, I think. Not picking up Chuba Hubbard, passing up on a lot of quarterbacks in the drafts. I think if he had, when you are drafting your second tight ends before your first quarterback. I mean, I don't know if that was the case, but I think so.
I would be surprised if he didn't trade for a quarterback at some point, and I'm sure he's trying to. I don't think he gets to the playoffs with this quarterback rotation with Jones and Heineke starting in some kind of streaming option.
Yeah, I have him on the outside looking in my playoff projections. So,
and I will say that I gave him a better grade than I thought I would because a lot of it I think was due to McCaffrey's injury. I was kinder to him than I was to James, and I was kinder to Darryl than I was to James because of I thought James's issues were more caused by just bad players versus like a major injury or a series of injuries that really it sucks too because it would have been a fantastic fantastic or I guess a more interesting case study to see Darryl and Jerry how they progressed during the season barring some crazy injury. Because they were the ones who waited till quarterbacks at the end.
Yep.
And it sucks that Daryl's had so many injuries and Jerry's had this big one that have really kind of been a variable to that case study. To pick up where you left off, I do think the reason I gave Jerry a C- and the reason I think I would have given him a D+, but for the fact that, again, the injuries, things that I mentioned, but also the fact that there is a silver lining. There is hope on the horizon in that McCaffrey's coming back into the rotation finally. Like he actually has weathered the storm at 4-4 somehow. Granted, he is lost.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle.
Well, I'm pretty sure, aside before last week, I want to say he lost 4 straight games. I don't remember off the top of my head.
He'd probably beat me in that stretch. I just can't I just lose.
Oh yeah, and he beat. That's right. He beat Brad by less than 5 this week. So say what you will about him, but he has. When you look at the benefit of him waiting on quarterback was when you look at his skill position players just on paper, they're some of the best in the league. McCaffrey, Eckler, Nuke, Julio, Keenan Allen, not to mention on his bench Tyler Lockett, and like you said, there is some depth there. Um,
The
Zach,
difference is you named 6 players, and he like I mean I don't have to keep harping on it. He waited too long to draft a quarterback.
he did, and again, I would be shocked if he didn't try to make a trade
Imagine
for.
his team right now if you hadn't given him Daniel Jones.
I agree.
It would be an F. It'd be a hard F.
It wouldn't be a hard F. Again, I think you give some flexibility for the McCaffrey injury. I do think, but let's look at Daniel Jones. Okay, let's hold on. And I'm not saying I will fully acknowledge I made a mistake in letting him go. But Daniel Jones also isn't like a QB1. He's a QB2 right now who hasn't had his bye. And his average scoring is like 17. That doesn't win you, even as a super flex, that doesn't win you most weeks. It's not like you still want 20 out of your quarterback, even as a QB2. I think you're still hoping for that 20-point performance.
Yeah. Well, I see. The thing with Daniel Jones is all of his wide receivers have been injured every week.
They're still getting injured. Like, Sterling Shepard went down last week.
Yeah, I know. I dropped him.
Yeah.
Fucking Sterling Shepard.
I'm still waiting for Kadarius Toney to blow up. And like even commentators are talking about it during their games. Like they need to get the ball more to Kadarius Toney. He's their best playmaker.
Just like if Saquon's back, Toney's back, Sterling Shepard's back, Galladay is back, like Daniel Jones could very well get a lot of top 10 performances week to week.
If I had a 15-inch penis, I might make more money. Like what are we talking about? Like it's again, we're talking
one
about
of those is more likely than the other.
You're right. There's no way the Giants will stay healthy. Like, no, I mean, there have been major injury issues. I understand your point. I do think he needs to make a trade for a quarterback. But I do think the upside is there that if, like, on weeks where McCaffrey, Eckler, Nuke, like, on weeks where his skill position players blow up, it'll be hard to... It'll keep him in most weeks, right? It'll be hard for him to just get trounced. He has a monumental gap at quarterback because Heineke and Daniel Jones will not. He's going to be when you compare his quarterback core. If he's starting Jones and Heineke to like other teams in the league, he's going to be ceding at least 10 to 15 points a week. The question is whether skill position players make that up. Not to mention he has Jared Cook at tight end, who's not really anything special. Right.
I've heard Jerry say on multiple occasions
Jared Cook is a terrible athlete.
Jared Cook is not good at football.
He's not, and Jerry of all people adding Jared Cook is hilarious to me. I guess just a good matchup against the Eagles, but he has role players on his bench in addition to one or two really good skill position players. I think he has a better chance to make the playoffs than James for what it's worth. But I still think if you're asking me...
I don't.
If you're asking me who the...
No, I have them at the same. I have both on the outside looking in. But
yeah.
I don't know which ones.
I would agree with you 100% there that they are on the outside looking in. And speaking of Jerry, he did just message me. Saying... Well, I think I can do remote tomorrow.
We'll figure that out later.
Doing it now. All
right, we're in though, so
let's keep going. So moving on, we'll go to the 4, 3, and 5 teams. We'll start at the top of the scoring list, which is Zach.
So the first note I made is that Jalen Hurts is really good for fantasy football. Number 4 quarterback right now, carrying Zach's team to relevance. 3 and 5 and 4th in points scoring, just under 1,000.
This is about the point in the podcast where my co-host should tell Zach his team is garbage.
We'll get there. Dak, great quarterback. Had the bye week and then missed a game, so his position rank is 2 games behind what it should be, but his average is 21.6 points. Like, it's incredibly good. I'd be happy with Dak on my team. Joe Mixon, solid. Bengals looked great until they lost to the Jets. Joe Mixon still scored a lot of points, though. So, good for Zach. What in the world happened to Mike Williams and Cortland Sutton? They have been invisible lately. Darren Waller started off amazing. He's been invisible lately.
Well, he's been injured.
He's got Michael Thomas on his team. That's great. He just underwent season-ending surgery, so good job, Zach. Way to stay ahead of the game. Mike Evans is solid. That's about it. Devontae Adams is Devontae Adams. So solid wide receivers. Mixon's good. Quarterbacks are good. Well, I say solid wide receivers. Solid Mike Evans and Devontae Adams. Cortland Sutton and Mike Williams are... You're not happy starting them right now. They both started off hot and have done nothing but decline. Waller's done nothing but decline. Are you really ever happy starting any Miami Dolphins players and Myles Gaskin as your RB2? Like, he's had a couple good games, but the Dolphins aren't good. Like, you don't always want running backs on bad teams. They can have good games, but it's not consistent.
I haven't heard a grade from you yet.
I'm giving Zach a B-.
B-. Okay.
He has horrible depth on his bench. Geno Smith, not depth. Damian Williams won't be getting any touches when he comes back.
Because it's going to be...
It's going to be David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert. Latavius Murray. Don't want to touch the Ravens' backfield with the 10-foot pole. Tony Pollard's fine. Like, you're not really happy starting him. But if you want to trade him to me, Zach, let me know. Michael Thomas... Great. Odell Beckham was excused from practice today for personal reasons. His dad just posted a video.
Yep.
Which was a low light reel of them missing OBJ on passes. He could be cut.
There is word on the street that that's one of the options. Either they're going to cut him and they'll basically they're not going to cut him. They will agree that he'll return part of his salary. He'll get to keep the rest, and that way he can go to waivers. Or they're going to basically they could do the disrespectful thing, do the Deshaun Watson treatment, and just pay him to be inactive.
I don't think they'll do that.
I don't think they're going to cut him though, because of the dead money they would put on the cap.
I don't think he is.
I don't think
deserving of a roster spot right now.
Yeah, for a fantasy perspective, I disagree.
I would say if there's literally no other good options, it's fine to hold him. But
because you want to.
He's a talent. You can keep him.
He's a talent.
You're not starting him anytime soon.
If he goes on waivers and goes to a different team, that's why I would hold him. Is he's worth at least a bench. OBJ's talent makes him worth a bench spot. Because really, look, he's already got Michael Thomas on his bench, right? What's one more roster spot that actually has a chance to come back this season?
For him, it's probably better than anyone you could pick up right now. So,
right.
Sure.
Your grade's a B-.
Because he does have good positions, especially he's solid at quarterback. Mixon's great. Mike Evans is great. Devontae Adams is great, even though he's out this week.
I was a little harsher. And I'm gonna because you gave him a B-, I think I'm gonna revise my grade slightly. I gave him a C+ now instead of a C. And it's mainly because it honestly, looking at Myles Gaskin aggravated me more than it should as a Miami Dolphins fan. But it's
you don't like the gas can?
Listen, I see our running back committee. It's nothing against the player. It's our running back committee is a three-headed workhorse in the form of Myles Gaskin, Malcolm Brown, Salvin Ahmed, and Gaskin's
happy starting him.
Right? No, you were absolutely correct on that point. I do think this is the inverse of what I was saying about Jerry's team, where Dak and Jalen Hurts are going to give him a 10 to 15 point head start over most quarterback committees week in, week out, putting up over 20. And I was singing Joe Mixon's praises. Honestly, I was singing Zach's praises early on in the post draft because of I believed in Dak Prescott, I believed in Jalen Hurts, I believed in Joe Mixon. I love those guys. I think that's a huge core. The real question mark on Zach's team is how his wide receiver core shakes out the rest of the year, right? Because Devontae Adams is a set him, start him and forget him, right? You start him week in, week out, no matter what.
I mean, so is Mike Evans.
You thought that, well, yeah, Mike Evans is boomer bust, but so...
He's had 2 bad weeks.
Mike Williams has had how many bad weeks?
No, Mike Williams is on the decline. He was
3
red flags right now.
He's had Mike Williams has had 3 bad weeks, of which two the last 2 have been bad weeks. But aside from that, Mike Williams has put up 18, 29, 1.6, 32, 3.7, 2.9. Like, I'm saying he's had 3 bad weeks in the season, 2 of which came in the last 2 weeks. Mike Evans, has put up 3, 22, 14, 11, 26, 3, 28, 11. So, like, 2 bad weeks out of the season. But, like, those 2 weeks are awful. The question is whether Mike Williams and Mike Evans are going to be, like, I would assume he starts those guys. Why he hasn't traded Courtland Sutton baffles me. Because that would seem to be the guy to trade, if anybody.
No one in this league trades, so.
I mean, that's fair. But, like, he has 3 startable wide receivers.
I ask people every week.
He has.
And
we were in talks for a little bit. And before something could materialize with the Chase Edmonds and Cooper Kupp for, who did you want? Jonathan Taylor, I think.
No, I wanted Nick Chubb, but I wasn't offering Cooper Kupp.
That was it.
Wanted me to offer.
I should have jumped on that trade, knowing what Chubb's going through right now.
I tried to tell you.
No, but Zach has a starting lineup that can absolutely boom. He absolutely could make the playoff season's end. He's actually 4th in scoring right now.
Yeah, like I have him in a playoff position right now.
And I would probably agree with you. But that's assuming that he makes a trade with... Alex just commented in the chat, I traded. That's assuming he makes a move to get another running back. Because he's not going to be able to make this... He's not going to be able to make the playoffs without another running back, period. If Myles Gaskin is his starting RB2 at season's end, he's not in the playoffs.
Zeke's going to get hurt, and it'll be Tony Pollard.
That would be ridiculous. So let's move on because it has been a little over an hour. We're down to 3.
We'll try and do 10 minutes of team here for the last ones if we can.
We're down to the last 3 teams. I'll keep a timer. This one is Brad.
Let me go to Brad's team so I can reference.
Take your time. I'm changing the text.
I am also giving Brad's team a B-.
Okay.
He's kind of in the same boat, 3 and 5. He's in 5th place in points scored, just 20 points behind Zach. But looking at his roster, Aaron Jones, stud. DK Metcalf, stud. Jamar Chase, stud. Chris Godwin, stud. Like, he's got a lot of really good players. Like, I mean, DK Metcalf and Jamar Chase, that's just an insane wide receiver duo. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if he comes back off IR, could be good. Yeah, you're right. Nah.
The really
lacking.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say the big weakness is at quarterback.
Sure.
He's got Lamar, but like right now, Tyrod Taylor's in the IR. He's starting Kenneth Gainwell in his superflex spot. That's bad. I would put literally anyone else in there. I would put AJ Dillon in over Kenneth Gainwell.
I don't think it stays like that. I don't think he set his lineup yet.
He didn't. You're right.
I would be shocked if his starting lineup isn't like, look at it like Lamar Jackson at QB1 and probably Baker at QB2.
Yeah, but Baker's not good.
I mean, Baker's not, but you start Baker against Cincy over Trevor Lawrence going against the best defense in football.
Yeah, probably.
I mean,
Yeah, definitely.
I actually hashtag bad luck Brad. I'm actually going to give him a little bit of a break relative to some of the. I've been a little bit harsh on some teams this grading system. I actually like Brad's team a lot for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. If you look at his lineup as like for playoffs, is Lamar Jackson, Aaron Jones, Michael Carter looks like he's actually locked up that starting job. Like he looked.
I mean, he's had the starting job for a while. Just
No,
Zach Wilson's really bad at football.
Right. But like, it seems like Mike White, White Magic.
Mike White dumps the football off to the running back.
Yep, that is his play over and over. And
Zach Wilson does not.
They'll eventually pick up. Defenses will eventually pick up on that and start like having a linebacker spy the running back on like the block and then release. But overall, Michael Carter's a fine running back too for right now, especially when he's got Kareem Hunt eventually coming back in the fold off IR, right? Like, so he's got the running back depth you need. Like you said,
don't like Kareem Hunt though.
But I do.
I think the Browns' backfield is going to be a three-headed monster.
Sure, but Kareem Hunt is the one you want because Kareem Hunt's the receiving back. They're going to play Kareem Hunt on passing downs. He's going to be the one catching passes, which boosts his value due to the half-point PPR. Not to mention the fact that he has 2 of the 5 best wide receivers so far in football. Granted, Metcalf hasn't had his bye week yet, but like he has wide receivers that are averaging over 15 a game.
Yeah, no, his wide receivers are the highlight of his roster.
It's awesome. His wide receiver core is fantastic. And I do think there's something to be said for Dallas Goedert and Tyler Higbee. I thought that Tyler Higbee was a fantastic late round tight end. I still think he is. But I think he actually, by season's end, might be starting Goddard week in, week out because of the Zach Ertz trade. I think that actually benefits him fairly significantly.
It does.
So overall, there's a lot that I like about Brad's team. It's not necessarily as deep. I actually think CEH is going to be a part of a committee that is not going to be as effective in Kansas City running the ball.
Yeah, I don't really want part of that backfield anymore.
And that's like he doesn't really have a ton of depth on his bench, but he has 3 running backs and 3 wide receivers, which is all you need.
His depth and questions at quarterback were why I made it a B-.
Yeah, but I gave him a B because I just love his starting lineup that much. Like,
I don't think he's like an injury to Jamar or Metcalf ruins his season.
I don't necessarily agree. I think he could stand one injury like that. I think let's say because he has 6 starters, right? And it happens to be 3 running back, 3 wide receivers. Any guy goes down, he's starting Jones, Carter, Kareem Hunt when he comes back, Metcalf, Chase, or Godwin. Whichever one goes down, he's starting the other 5.
Okay, he can sustain 1. All right.
He can sustain 1. The real issue is his super flex because he has Lamar Jackson starting at QB1. His super flex is either Baker or Trevor Lawrence based on committee, and like those aren't guys when they're averaging less than 15 a week. Those aren't guys I necessarily want on my team. So I gave him a B, but I think if he stays healthy, he's got a decent shot to make the playoffs, which is all you can ask for being 5th in scoring.
Whose team do you like better, Zach's or Brad's?
It's close. Given that I gave Brad a significantly better grade, I'll probably go Brad just based on like I like his starting lineup more than Zach's. Okay. But I think they're fairly close.
Yeah, I think they're very close.
I think I was a little bit hard on Zach. Last 2 teams in the standings. Now we get to the part that I don't know that I'm gonna like. Let's go to my team. So, and we actually did that. We did Brad's in 5 minutes. So well done, guys. A little over 5 minutes. So Jason, since you let me go first. For yours, I will let you go first for mine.
All right, let's pull up your team real quick. Chug time machine. All right, so let's go over the positives real quick. Quarterbacks are solid. Josh Allen, Joe Burrow,
Better than solid.
really good. If something happens to one or one's on bye, did they both already have their bye?
Allen has had his. Burrow has not had his.
Burrow's coming up, so you'll potentially be hurting there. But
notice
assuming they're both starting, you're fine.
Well, notice just one thing I just wanted to point out, and I did this deliberately. So, Joe Burrow's bye is coming up week 10.
And who does Justin Fields play week 10?
He happens... Oh,
That's
wait.
his bye.
Dang it, I'm an idiot. Who did I have before that? I think the guy I had last week had a really good bye matchup. It's fine. I'll figure it out. It's whatever. I thought I had something for this.
So, yeah, quarterbacks are good. Jonathan Taylor is a monster. I'm down on Chubb right now.
Everyone else.
Dearness Johnson still had plenty of action there. We'll see how it shakes out. He could be fine, but it's not going to be as productive as before. He'll still get you fantasy points, but definitely smaller. Bobby Tree's coming to life lately. I like Robert Woods right now, especially with teams. I mean, they're going to have to stop Cooper Kupp, and that's where Bobby Trees gets open. I mean, Jalen Waddle has had I think 1 or 2 good games, but you're not happy starting him, I don't think.
He's a role play. He's the kind of guy. Anytime I have a bye, I'm fine starting Jalen Waddle. He's had he's hit or miss, right? He's had 4 10+ weeks. He's had 4 weeks of 6 or less. Yeah. But the targets are what I love about Jalen Waddle. His target. Listen to these targets. Just targets. 6, 8, 13, 4. 6, 13, 8, 12.
Yeah, but I mean, how great are Tua targets?
I understand. Trust me, I know better than anybody about that issue. But I'll let you go on.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you stop interrupting me?
Sorry.
You'll have time to talk about your team.
Oh, I know.
Allen Robinson, as long as status quo continues, he's worthless. Jamal Williams, you're never happy starting him if Swift gets hurt.
I've started him once.
Yeah, I mean, Marvin Jones Jr. could be fine. Tony could pay off. Darrell Williams, Jacoby Myers hasn't had a touchdown in his NFL career.
Added him this week.
Yeah, I've thought about adding him. He gets some looks, he gets some yards, but I mean, at some point, the history just isn't there. You're 3-5. You're 7th in points scored. You have some pieces. You have no depth though, at all on your bench. You're never starting Allen Robinson. You're never starting Jamal Williams. You could start Marvin Jones Jr. You could start Tony. Darrell Williams, you're never starting. Jacoby Myers, you're never starting. You're never starting Justin Fields because you never are. So your bench just has no value. Your starting roster is fine for the most part. Jalen Waddle's big if. T. Higgins, massive if to me. I'm super low on T. Higgins. Nick Chubb, not going to be nearly as productive as before. He'll still probably get you 10 to 12 points a game. And because you are 7th in points scored, I'm giving your team a C+.
It's awful kind of you. So I'm gonna talk my grade out because I haven't honestly arrived at it yet. This is the one grade I didn't really think too much about beforehand. I do think I actually have. I think you can make a case that I have one of, if not the best, quarterback core in the league. Josh Allen and Joe Burrow have been lights out. They've both been QB1s. And I think that for the same reason you're down on I don't know what reasons you have for being down on T. Higgins. T. Higgins, I think...
He's not good.
I couldn't disagree with you more. I think he is the most undervalued... if I... In other leagues, I have T. Higgins as a potential... a major undervalued trade target. T. Higgins is the guy, I think, who in the second half of the season could take a huge leap forward. And the reason why is because Cincy has been effective when they've aired the ball out with Joe Burrow. They've used the run and with Mixon they've established the run first, then they start doing some play action passes and take deep shots. You saw, I think, a 55-yarder that T. Higgins caught maybe a week or two ago. I don't know if it was a week or two ago. But, like, you see what Joe Burrow can make of a fantasy wide receiver that he likes in Jamar Chase. Like, if that it's the same like, I had the logic for these wide receivers, right? Like Robert Woods and T. Higgins, right? Look at their counterparts. Can you imagine if instead of drafting T. Higgins and Robert Woods, I drafted Cooper Kupp and Jamar Chase? Like, I had the logic of these committees, but I picked the wrong guys. But that's why I think there's actually some significant upside. Like you said, Robert's coming into his own. He's been solid the last couple weeks. And I think T. Higgins
Robert Woods has been solid in years past. T. Higgins has never been that guy.
T. Higgins is actually, though, despite his injury issues, is still averaging over 10 a game. As is Jalen Waddle, surprisingly. Which, they're not elite, right? But these are guys who are right now my wide receiver 2 and my flex play. Not to mention, jury's still out on Kadarius Toney, who's kind of working his way back from injury. Marvin Jones has actually put up more than 10 a game as well. Surprisingly, he's been super inconsistent, but he's there. Like, my wide receiver core is the weakest part of my team. If I can get 3 guys who are putting up 10 a week when I have Josh Allen throwing 30, Joe Burrow throwing 20, Jonathan Taylor throwing 20, and Nick Chubb hopefully throwing 15, if I can get 30 to 40 points out of my wide receiver core, or even if one guy goes off, I should be competing most weeks, I think. Granted, that's quick math, but like 50 from quarterbacks, 35 from running backs is 85. Say 5 from defense puts me at 90. If I get 30 points out of my wide receiver core, just 10 from each, we're talking 120. If I get 40 points in my wide receiver core, 130, right? Like, I'll be competitive most weeks. So you're absolutely right that the biggest.
Sure, and I could have a 15-inch dick.
I'm glad that went full circle. No, like, you absolutely correctly identified the biggest weakness of my team. I am one major injury from being effectively eliminated. And honestly, like, the fact that I'm even competitive right now is nothing short of a miracle the way the season started for me.
I mean, your team is on an upward trend.
It is. Sure. You want to know a surprising statistic that I thought of before this podcast? Of the 8 weeks of the season, there have been 2 different times where my team, 7th in overall points scored, where my team has led all scorers. There have been 2 different weeks where I've been the manager of the week. And I was surprised by that fact, but it's true. My team does have boom potential. I was the leading scorer last week. You're right, I'm on an upward trajectory. I've won, with the exception of the game where I dropped Danny Dimes when Josh Allen was on bye, like an idiot, and that was my biggest mistake. If I hadn't done that, I would be 4-4. Because that was why I lost to James. I ceded 15 points by starting Allen Robinson one more stupid time instead of Danny Dimes. A stupid decision. And let me also say one more thing about that, because I did it. I obviously did it to add Deshaun Watson. It was a huge gambit that did not pay off, obviously, right? I do think the upside was there. It obviously didn't pan out. But again, like I said earlier, Danny Dimes is averaging 17 a week, right? Justin Fields is, like, last week looked really good, put up 25. If he ever does get into a rhythm, right, I'm not going to be upset dropping Danny Dimes for Justin Fields if Justin Fields turns into what we thought he would be at season's beginning.
If you had dropped Danny Dimes for Justin Fields, I would agree with you.
I understand it fell into my lap that way. I understand it wasn't calculated. I understand Danny Dimes was a huge mistake, and I freely
we're on the same page then. I would probably rather, in your position, have Justin Fields over Daniel Jones, because you don't need Daniel Jones, and if Justin Fields hits, That's good.
And that is why I made the move, by the way, is because I had Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. Granted, I did it at the worst possible time when Allen was on bye, but like I knew I had the guys to start. So anyway, back to my team. I think I have an overall a good to some weeks great, like on an occasional week great starting lineup with no depth, which is why I will give myself the same grade you did, a C plus.
I have you on the bubble.
And that's where I think I belong. One injury and I'm done, and I know that. But the fact that I started 0-4 and am on the bubble, I couldn't be happier with where I am. It's like, desperation makes success feel that much better. Not to mention, by the way, we haven't even talked about Mike Gesicki, top 5 tight end, like I said earlier. Like,
How many points is he averaging?
I think 10. But like at a weak position, he has a pretty good floor, right? Like,
yeah, he's been fine.
He didn't do anything in week 1. He was only targeted twice, which is why I think I dropped him. And since that time, he's been targeted at least 6 times, all but one game.
I'd be happy with Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, like he's what you want in a tight end, someone who's gonna like just boost your score a little bit consistently, relative to the position.
Let's move on to the last place team. We say last place. There's 4 teams tied at 3 and 5. So.
That's true. Like the last of the 3 and 5 teams, and it is Daryl. Not gonna bother with Nick because Nick doesn't watch the podcast.
Yeah, it's Daryl's team.
It's Daryl's team, and it's just like the worst luck you can imagine with injuries for Daryl.
It's been bad, getting worse. I don't. So I'll start, I guess, so you can evaluate the team.
Yep.
Wentz is fine. Teddy Bridgewater's fine. They're both really consistent. So, they'll get you your 30 points a game between the two of them. Alvin Kamara is just going to keep being Alvin Kamara. Saquon, if he's healthy, could be good. CeeDee Lamb is on a very high upward trajectory. Jerry Jeudy's a lot of hype.
He's been injured.
Yeah, he missed 6 games.
Yeah.
So, he's back now. George Kittle, I think, is supposed to start this week or next week. Obviously, you've seen what George Kittle can do. Saints defense, fucking juggernaut. They're going to dumpster over Atlanta. Just, no lube. It's going to be rough. Calvin Ridley, though, he could be back in 2 weeks. He could be back next season. He could never return to football. Nobody knows. So, like, what do you do with Calvin Ridley? You can't really drop him. You could try to trade him. You could hope he comes back and plays. Will it be good if he plays? Who knows? It's a lost bench spot. That's what it is right now. Mm-hmm. Brandon Ayuk, super disappointing. They just throw it to Debo and call it a day. I think he had a touchdown last week. He might start doing a little better. Did he have a touchdown? Might have gotten called back. No, it was the week before he had a touchdown. Right? No. I think he had one and got called back. I can't remember. Emmanuel Sanders has been, 0 goose egg last week. Before that, he was fine. He just lost Jameis. Taysom Hill's gonna play. It's just been rough. Like, he's got D'Ernest, but now that's gonna be a 3-headed monster. So, like, his team, it's really not that bad. Like, look at your position ranks you like to go off of. Like, it's like Jerry Jeudy, obviously outlier because he hasn't really played, but like his starting lineup really isn't that bad, all things considering. Weak in that second quarterback position, but Taysom Hill's a running quarterback, and when he played before, I think every time he started, he's gotten over 20 points as the quarterback. So that could actually be fine. I think he might actually get more points than Jameis. But yeah, he's had a rough start, but I don't think it's as bad as it's been made out to be. I still have him out of the playoffs, but I give his team a C. I think he could win some games going forward here.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a huge. I mean, Saquon out, Jerry Jeudy out, Kittle out, Calvin Ridley out. Like, he's had a large chunk of his team. Noah Fant out. He's had a bunch of injuries week in and week out on his team, and long term ones that he's had to just manage. Not to mention that he's like they were injuries to his strongest players. Not like he's losing quarterbacks, and then I mean didn't he lose? Yeah, he lost Jameis.
Yep,
but
he lost Jameis.
And I'll talk about that more in a second. But like, he's aside from this week's injury to Jameis, which is yet another season-ending injury he's had to deal with. Like, he's had injuries that have kept a lot of his players out for significant portions of the season thus far. The silver lining,
his team is still better than James and Jerry.
I would agree, and the reason why is because he's getting a lot of these guys back all at the same time, right? With the exception of Saquon, I think most of these guys might come back. Like, Kittle's a kind of a question mark. Kittle might come back this week. Saquon, I don't think is coming back this week, but CD should play. Jerry Jeudy should play. He's getting at least some of his players back, and not to mention, he made an interesting move this week that I said I'd get back to. When Jameis went out, he dropped 31% of his budget on Taysom Hill, which is much like me dropping Danny Dimes for Tyrod or for Deshaun Watson was. This is a huge gamble because Taysom Hill might not even be the starter. He might not even play.
He's the starter.
I don't.
He's 100% the starter.
I don't know that that's accurate.
I will bet you any amount of money.
I'm not saying he doesn't.
If he's cleared protocol, which he should be, then he will be the starter.
But that's the question. If he clears protocol,
he's on trajectory too.
Okay. Like,
so, okay, this week aside, let's say he's not cleared this week.
After
he
this
would
week,
be the starter 100%.
Yeah.
So, like, dropping your budget is fine.
Sure. And I will say, like, Taysom Hill, in terms of, like, I love the move in terms of, like, it's less risky, obviously, than adding Deshaun Watson, because Taysom Hill, when he plays, has a skill set similar to Jalen Hurts. Right. It does fix his biggest area of need. So I get why he makes the move there. The other big move he made, again this week's waiver wire, he drops 27% of his budget on Jeremy McNichols, who is the receiving back out of Tennessee.
Why McMillan didn't pick up both of them, I'll never know.
I don't get it either. But like he is, what's the right analogy here? Jeremy McNichols is the Kareem Hunt to AP's Nick Chubb, if we're using that analogy for how they're going to be used, in the running back core. He actually, from my understanding, and I could be wrong about this, Alex, I think, just posted in the chat, he beat Alex's bid.
Yeah, Alex bid $300.
Yeah.
It was like $317 to $302.
307. 307. He literally beat him by $10.
Like he's gonna put up numbers.
I would think so.
He's gonna be the starter. So
it's actually, though, I'm saying, like, that's his one area that he really was struggling with more than any other pre-draft or post-draft, I guess, and now he's got a potential viable solution to that, because if Taysom Hill turns out to be a borderline QB1 or even a high-end QB2, Bridgewater's a low-end QB2, like a low-end super flex option. Wentz is already a QB1. Like, all of a sudden, if he has Wentz and Taysom Hill starting every week, and Taysom Hill's like a viable super flex option,
Wentz isn't a QB1.
Right now, he's 11th. I mean, he's 17.5 a week. Like, it's not what you want out of your quarterback. But
he's 11th and hasn't had his bye yet.
But I'm just saying, if Taysom Hill puts up similar numbers, right? He still has 34 out of his quarterback core. It's not anything you love, but it gets you through if you have Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, Damian Harris, George Kittle starting.
It's the dark horse team. I think his team could. like far better odds than like James or Jerry.
I
I think
think
his team has some potential.
I gave him a C minus, but I think he actually has, like you said, I think he has more upside certainly than James and probably than Jerry. I think he actually, like, if the season ended today, right? It would be myself, Daryl, what?
Brad and Zach out.
Jerry.
No,
It would be
Zach would be in. Jerry would be out.
Yeah, it would be myself, Jerry, Brad, and Daryl out, right? But I think at the season's end, like if we had to say 4 teams that are most likely to, like in terms of total points scored, that indicate who's most likely to miss the playoffs, it's myself, Daryl, James, and Jerry. And of those other teams down at the bottom, Daryl would scare me the most in terms of that competition. Like yeah. I think Daryl. Here's the question I have for you: Who would you say if you had to pick one of these 3 teams to make the playoffs? Who would you pick? Let's say.
Okay, I already have that lined up. So
let's say Burchak's in, McMillan's in, you're in. Let's go ahead and even say Zach and Brad are in, right? You have one of, like, let's say of the remaining 5 teams being Window, myself, Daryl, James, and Jerry. Who do you pick?
So I'll just tell you what I think my projected playoffs are. Alex is the 1 seed. I think I take the 2 seed.
Ooh.
I think good odds to make the playoffs are Andrew, Zach, and Brad. I think the next tier of players is Jason McMillan, you, and Daryl. I'm lower on McMillan than you are.
That's fair.
I don't think he's guaranteed to make the playoffs 1 game above 500. But his points scored is probably going to push him in.
That's what I think.
James and Jerry out if I had to lowest odds of making it in. So that's where things sit for me.
I guess I telegraphed my tiers, but if I had to make a tier list, I actually think right now I think Alex, in my view,
he's on a tier
stands
right
alone.
Yeah.
Then I would put I would actually say underneath that are you and McMillan. Then I have Brad and Zach, and then I have like tier 4 is kind of like my wild card tier of like wild card bitches of Window, Daryl, myself, and Jerry, and then I have James as I don't think you're gonna be relevant tier.
Yeah.
So,
so
we've talked for an hour and 40 minutes. Let's do this to because this has been one of probably the longest podcasts of the year, and I don't want to take up more of your time than absolutely necessary. But let's do this: instant reaction, gut call, predictions. We'll do them like instant, no logic, no rationale. Pick your you got to just pick them.
Okay.
Myself versus Zach.
And
you can look at the matchups, but like no logic. Just pick your team. You can say
Adams out.
You can say 1 sentence.
I'll pick you.
I also pick me. My matchups are too good. Moving on. Jerry and McMillan.
Man, that's a tough one.
You can look at the matchups. You get 1 sentence to justify your pick, but we both went in me.
All right, let's look here. Come on.
Yeah, I'm loading the site too. It's a little bit slow.
Jerry and McMillan. I'm still there's a lot of question marks over DeAndre Hopkins' hamstring. Christian McCaffrey might not play this week still. That's up in the air. I'm going with McMillan.
I actually will do the same. I think even if like McCaffrey doesn't play, I think Zach Moss gets a good matchup against Jacksonville. I know I said only one sentence, so I'm going to shut up. But there are too many question marks on Jerry's team with Jordan Love taking his first start. So I'll go McMillan. All right, Alex versus James. Do we even need to take long to think about this one?
No, it's Alex.
It's not close. It's Alex.
It's
next up, Window versus who's Window play? I'm pulling it up now. Brad.
This is an interesting one.
Brad hasn't said his lineup, just for what it's worth.
Yeah. Metcalf and Godwin on bye. Probably going Window. I don't like it, but I think Brad's more hurt by buys. Having to start Trevor Lawrence hurts.
He doesn't have to start Trevor Lawrence. He can also start Baker if he wants to.
Tua gets Houston, so...
Tua does get Houston. That is a good matchup for him. I actually go Brad. I think Lamar Jackson... I just think I like Brad's lineup more than I like Window's lineup.
I just don't like who has to start at wide receiver.
Oh, because he doesn't have DK.
Yeah, he doesn't have DK Metcalf or Chris Godwin.
Oh, I didn't see that. Sorry, Brad. I take back what I said. Yeah, that sucks. I don't know what he's gonna do. I'll go Window then, unless until I see otherwise. Sorry.
Window's team is fine until the starting running backs take over all of his 6 backup running back positions.
He's fine for now. Last matchup of the week. You get Daryl. And remember, Daryl does not have an RB2 right now because Saquon is projected to be out.
Yeah, it's closer than I would like. You know, if you had told me 4 weeks ago that I was playing Daryl this week, I'd have been like, well, I'm easily going to win. I'm taking myself.
I agree. I do think he has some good matchups.
I picked up Colts D in advance.
Yeah, I mean, you have the Colts D against the Jets. He has the Saints D against Atlanta, right?
That's true. I'd probably rather have the Saints D. Honestly.
Absolutely. It's the number 2 defense in fantasy, and it's playing the Falcons. Like, there's a lot to like about Daryl's matchups. He gets Kamara against Atlanta. He gets CeeDee Lamb going against Denver. And when Dallas takes the lead, Denver will be throwing to catch up. So Jerry Jeudy might be heavily involved. Carolina's defense isn't great. Damian Harris gets to run against that. Carson Wentz gets to throw against the Jets secondary.
Zeke's going to drop a 30 burger, though, so it's fine.
That's the thing. It's like, he has good matchups. You have good players.
Kittle still is a question mark. Saquon still is a question mark. If those two start, I think it'll be a close game.
I think it'll be fairly close either way, but I am going to give you the nod because I like I said, this is a matchup of players, like talent versus matchups, and in those when push comes to shove, I tend to go players in that scenario. So that is the podcast. 1 hour 45 minutes of your slightly post midseason grades. I want to wrap up by thanking Jason Smith tremendously for being on the pod, for bearing with me for almost 2 hours. This was awesome. We may try to get one more grading in towards the end of the regular season, just for shits and giggles. But
reminder, trade deadline is coming up.
A month away. It is literally a month to the day today. It'll be at 3 a.m. on a month from now. The trade deadline hits. So get your trades in if you need to make moves. I want to give one more shout out real quick. Shout out to Window, to, Jason, you were already in the chat, but shout out to you for being on the pod. But shout out to Window and Alex for commenting in the chat. Again, if you have any questions, you can hit us up on our Facebook group or our YouTube page or our league page, all of which are linked in the description of this video. Thank you guys for watching. Good luck to everybody this week, and hopefully I get my 4th win in 5 weeks.
Till next time.